Test 1, 2.
Morning, everybody. It was way more muted than the Talk of the Lions gear earlier, about 30 seconds ago. So it is good to have you all here in this building this morning. If you're joining us online, we are glad that you are joining us from there as well. It is good to be together on this sunny fall Sunday. And to just root ourselves in this practice of coming together, right? It's good to gather together. So we're glad that you chose to do that this morning with us. Just a couple of quick announcements for you as we move into our morning here together. If you are on our email list, you would have gotten an email this past week about a new or a steward position that has opened up. Nick DeGraff had to make the difficult decision to step back due to some things in his life going on. So we need to fill his position. If you don't know what a steward of care is or does, that info should be in your email. If you don't have that email, let one of us know and we can get you connected with that information as well. But if you know of somebody who you would think would be a good fit for that role, we would love to hear that no later than next Sunday so we can get that team filled out one more time here. So let us know if you have questions, and you can email those nominations to that email right up on your screen, okay? Next Sunday, we are going to gather again at JB's Pizza in the evening. Bethany is going to lead us in a conversation around emotions. She spoke last week a little bit about it, telling us that she is thinking a little bit of how many of us maybe grew up thinking about emotions and how emotions and church and faith kind of have this interesting, maybe odd relationship. So reframing that a little bit and to say, how can we really listen to what our emotions are telling us, and embrace them maybe a little bit more than we were taught to do. So we hope you'll come to that. Please also share the Facebook event that has been floating around our Facebook page. If you can share that would be wonderful. Invite your friends, your neighbors. Everything is free. We do need you to register, however, and soon, because we have to get pizza order in. So please don't make me panic that we're not going to have enough food. So register and let us know you're going to come to that event. Okay? All right. That's all I have for this. Chris is going to move us into what we're doing next.
We're going to do something a little different this morning. As we begin, I want to invite us to listen to a piece of music. There's a new album, a few weeks old, from Coldplay. They have been my number one artist for the year when Spotify does the yearly recap, so I do listen to them often, it's true. And the album is titled Moon Music, and the title track, the opening track on that album has that title. And I want to listen to this song for a couple reasons. One, I think lyrically it's quite lovely. Compelling. And as you'll see, I'm going to suggest it's a good way for us to start our time together. The other reason is just because, in my opinion, and this is certainly subjective, it is beautiful. And I don't know what kind of week you have had. Even if you've had a good week or even just a normal week, I suspect you wouldn't be hurt to have a little more beauty in your life. And music is one of, if you stop and think about it, I know we have our headphones on all the time and our right earbuds, and we're always listening to music. We probably can take it for granted. It's really one of the most stunning and profound gifts that we have. Because I don't know anyone who isn't moved by music. It might be a different type of music than what I might be moved by. So, this song is 4.5 minutes long. 2/3 of it is instrumental, which means no words to listen to or worry about. Simply, this is an opportunity to enjoy the beauty of music. And so you might want to close your eyes in the first couple of minutes. You might want to, just let it kind of wash over you. Take it in. Maybe you're hearing this for the first time. I'm sure for many of you it will be. And then we get to the lyrics, and those will be on the screen as Chris Martin is singing them. If you're online, you're going to have to get a little fancy, and you need to go to YouTube, and you need to Google Coldplay Moon Music, and find this entry. That's a screenshot of it, because we don't have the license to stream this song. We can play it here with the license that we have, but we don't have the license to stream it as well. That is extra bucos. And so you're all going to have to hack it if you're online. You're going to have to just find it yourselves. You can do it, I believe in you, on your phone or whatever. And then I'll go do 3, 2, 1, and you can hit play, and we'll hit play at the same time, and then we'll listen to it together. All right? So a little different this morning, but I want to invite you to sit back, to enjoy the gift of music, and then when those lyrics come on 2/3 of the way or so through, to enjoy those too, and to see if they don't resonate with you in some way, shape, or form. All right, hope I gave those of you who are online enough time to find the song. 3, 2, 1.
upon a time I tried to get myself together, be more like the sky and welcome every kind of weather, be more eagle-like and find the flight in every feather. Once upon a time, but I'm still trying to get better. Maybe I'm just crazy, I should just be a brick in the wall, sit and watch the TV, blame everyone else for it all. But I'm trying to trust in the heavens above, and I'm trying to trust in a world full of love, fire and water, and constantly dream of the balance of things and the music between. Does anyone out there? I'm close to the end. Does anyone out there? I just need a friend.
And then it moves into the second song on the album. Any words there stand out to you or strike you? Did you catch any of the lyrics? Trying to get my life together, he says. Maybe I should just be a brick in the wall. You can feel that way, I think, sometimes. Maybe it's just better to sit down and watch the TV. Be a brick in the wall. Be a part of the kind of stagnant life. But I'm trying to trust in the heavens above. I'm trying to trust in a world full of love. And then he goes on and he ends with that weird distorted line at the end, I just need a friend, right? And I think we probably come to this place at least some weeks with a similar longing, saying to ourselves, maybe just to ourselves, I'm trying to trust in a world full of love, a world that's actually could be like that. I'm trying to trust in the heavens above that God is at work and that somehow I'm a part of it. I'm trying to do that. But I need a friend because it's really hard to trust those things sometimes. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we come together every week, because we're friends to each other in that sense. We're co-travelers. We're trying to move together in a direction toward a world full of love. And we need each other to do that. So, a little different way to start this morning. A little strange, perhaps, a little unusual, but I hope something in there maybe resonated with you. We're going to have a call to worship here, and then we're going to enter a time of prayer after that.
Would you join me in these words that will be up on the screen? Your part will be in bold. We are gathered here, uniquely in all of history, we particular people in this singular time and place. As we gather, we pray together. Tune our hearts to the voice of your Spirit, O God. Wake us to be present to you and to one another in these shared moments. O God, you know our hearts and our needs. Among us are some who are anxious, some who are weary, some who are lonely, some who suffer pain or sorrow. May we find the grace to embrace the sorrows of one another. And among us are some who are rejoicing, hearts made light by good news, good health, glad anticipation. May we find the grace to embrace the joys of one another. Let us cherish these moments and care for one another deeply, for each of us and our relationships to one another are precious. Amen.
Pray here, but we're going to do it in a way that is not so much hands folded and eyes closed, but more writing and reflecting and wondering. And you'll see on the walls are 3 different pieces of paper with words on them that perhaps are familiar to you. If you've been here maybe for a few months, you've probably seen us use these words before as a framework for prayer. Praise being opportunities to give thanks for things in our life that we are grateful for. Often it seems the easiest one, or maybe the one that is the easiest to think about because it's generally joyful and light and lovely. On the flip side is protest, a word to describe us naming those things in this world that are not as they should be. We're protesting to God. We're saying, God, this has to change. This can't go on like this. And it could be something in our individual lives, of course. It could be something more largely in the world. And the petition there in that back corner is asking, given the things that we're grateful for, and given the things that are not as they should be in this world, we are well aware of our need. And so, God, we ask you for whatever it is that we need. I'm going to lead us through those 3 times. One way that you could enter into this would be to grab some of the sticky notes around you, and there should be enough. You can borrow from another row, or if we need to throw some your way, we can do that. There are pens around. We have lots of extra sticky notes here. We'll just pass a few stacks around in case. You can peel off more if you think you need a little bit more. Just looking at the rows with more folks in it. Mm-hmm. If you don't need them, you can just leave them on the end of the row. And, well, you're welcome to fold your hands and close your eyes, of course. But prayer is not only something that happens when we are in that posture. And so, whatever posture would be most helpful to you this morning, I invite you into that. But let's begin with praise. Let me invite you to think for a moment about what is worthy of celebration in your life, what you're thankful for, from the extravagant and unbelievable and miraculous to the mundane, that you're here breathing, that the sun is shining. So take a moment. If you'd like to write those down, 1, 2, 10 things, whatever comes to your mind. Yeah, and if you'd like, you can put them up on those pieces of paper. You also can hang on to them if you'd like. Maybe you need to just kind of hold them for a little bit. Later in the morning, we'll share communion together. And when we're up doing that, that would be another time where you could place these prayers in those places. What are you grateful for? What is not as it should be? What breaks our heart? What's been difficult? What needs to change in your neighborhood, in this city, again in the world? No shortage of things here. I don't think the goal is to list as many as you can necessarily, but to list whatever, again, comes to your heart and your mind. I'll give you a minute to do that. Yeah, in a moment. Mm-hmm. In a moment. What are you grateful for? What do you hope would change? And then what do you need? Or what do we need? Again, thinking about your life, your personal life, the circumstances, absolutely. What do you need in that way? And again, you can also be thinking about what do we need as a country, perhaps, as we approach this election. What's needed in those places of conflict in the world? You get the idea. I'll give you a minute to write those things down. If you're online, certainly hope that you are joining us in some way, shape, or form that makes sense for you in that environment that you're in. Just know there are people moving all around this room right now, writing, placing. We're glad to have you join us however you might. Sometimes we need to sit with these questions, and so again, invite you to keep reflecting as you need to here this morning, and you can place things on these pieces of paper at any time. But just kind of quickly glance at these pages, which reflect just a fraction of what we have carried in here this morning, right? We come in here carrying many things, feeling many things. And what a gift it is, I think, to check in with ourselves about what we're carrying and then to share it together in a simple way like this. Let me offer a hands folded and eyes closed prayer. And then we're going to move into a time of greeting. But let me just lift these things up here that have been shared this morning. God, I don't need to go around and read every one of these sticky notes because you are already aware of what is on our heart. We thank you for that. Give us what we need to carry these things, if they are ours to carry, to let them go, if we need to let go, and give us the strength to put our arms around each other, the awareness to know who we need to stand next to and with. And in that way, we are asking really just that you would help us be people of love, helping to bring about more and more a world of love. So we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Thanks, friends. I'm grateful for you, for sharing in this with you. Now let's share a smile and a handshake and a how are you this morning. Let's stand up and greet each other here for a few minutes. All right, folks. How about if we keep moving on here? So we've been taking on the very light and fluffy topic of faith and politics the last couple weeks. Grateful for a community where we can have some of these harder conversations or these relevant conversations. To do this, we've been really focusing on three things that often are a part of the political process or the political machine: fear, power, and violence. Teresa talked about fear a couple of weeks ago. The ways in which fear is not all bad. It's good if a bear's chasing you to have a little bit of fear and to react appropriately. But fear so quickly can control us. That's kind of the trick, right? And in terms of politics, fear is leveraged all the time by both parties for centuries. This is old hat sort of stuff. And of course, it's still going on today, where we try to use fear to manipulate people to act. So that was a couple weeks ago. Last week, we talked about power and the difference between self-interested power and selfless power. And of course, we kind of know which one is right, but we need to be honest about again, how our political process is often completely self-interested in its accumulation of power, its attainment of power. And as Christians, at least, as people who follow Jesus and try to follow his example, we are invited into a different way when it comes to power. Not a self-interested accumulation of power, but a giving away, a selfless, a use of power that pays attention to the people on the margins. Today we're going to talk about violence, which may not seem as obvious of a part of the political process or the political machine, but I'm suggesting that it is, and I'm not the only one. It's also something that shows up in the scriptures. And so we're going, just in the theme of doing different things today, we're going to not have a sermon entirely this morning. We're going to have much more of a conversation. So if you're new here this morning, you're newish, I apologize. It's not always like this, but I think still this will be meaningful, even though it is a little different. What I'm passing out are 4 different passages from the Bible, all from the Gospels. They tell the same story. The story of Jesus' arrest at the hands of, do you remember who? Who's his disciple that betrays him? Yeah, you know Judas. I mean, come on, the guy's got like a bad name for millennia. Something like that, close enough, close enough. There you go. We're going to read these. I am going to have to come back and get more. If you have extras, raise your hands. Here you go, Joyce. Thank you, Kevin. That probably will do it. Yep, I gave you the biggest stack, didn't I? Thank you. Everybody got one? Thank you. If you're online, I'm going to throw up a QR code here in a second that'll take you to a PDF. So you can scan this QR code with your phone, point it at the TV screen, and it'll take you to these same 4 passages. So it's not often that the same story is told in all 4 of the Gospels. You may not know this, but the 4 Gospels are quite different. In a variety of ways, they're different. And so even when they're telling the same story, they're looking at them often from different angles. There are different details in some that are not in others. And this is a story that has something to say about violence. and the use of violence to get what you want. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to read the Matthew passage, and then I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to write, circle, connect, jot down your thoughts, what stands out to you. About a minute, and then I'm going to read the Mark passage and give you a minute after we read that one to do the same thing. And then Luke, and then John. And once we're through the fourth one, and you've had a minute to reflect on it, to jot notes and to underline things, then we're going to have a conversation. And I have no real agenda other than to say, like, so what do you notice? And then we'll see what we all notice together about this story. So Matthew 26, 47 to 56. Here's what Matthew's gospel says about this story. While he was still speaking, the he being Jesus, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man, arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him. "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, Am I leading a rebellion that you've come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. What do you notice? Circle, underline, jot notes in the margins, questions that you have, things that come up in your mind. I'm going to give you about 60 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next one. And yeah, I hear some of you talking amongst yourselves. That'd be great. Chat it up. See what other people around you think. Share an idea. All right. That's Matthew's version. Here's Mark's. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you've come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus, and when they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. It's a little different in some ways. What do you notice? What do you notice between the two that we've read now? I'll give you a minute to think about it. All right, that's a good place. Let's read Luke's version. While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going on, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the high priest, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you've come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns." All right, let's take a minute. All right, we have one more. This is John's Gospel. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people. I'll give you a minute to make a couple more notes, and then we'll have a little bit of conversation here. All right. So let's have a conversation. And we'll just begin with that simple question of what did you notice? I think it's always interesting to, when we can, read stories that are found in multiple Gospels. Again, because they're different. No doubt you noticed some of those differences. Ryan, what did you notice? Yep. 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 Yeah, that's right. Very good. Okay. Yeah, Luke's the only one that mentions that Jesus heals the ear of the servant. Mm-hmm. And Ryan's noting that tradition says that Luke was a physician, so the person who wrote Luke's gospel was someone who maybe had a special eye for that sort of thing. Yeah, Bethany's noting that John's gospel has Jesus being identified in a very different way. It mentions that Judas is there, but he doesn't kiss Jesus. Jesus is kissed in the other three. And Bethany's saying, well, it seems to me that John's accounting makes more sense. Why would Jesus need to be identified by these folks? They knew who he was. Fair question, no doubt. Yeah. Yeah. That message that shows up multiple times. Put your sword away. Could I not call down a legion? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yep. Deb's pointing out that very last line in John there where Caiaphas says, hey, he actually says this a little bit earlier. We read this story last week. He advised the leaders it'd be better for one person to die than for the people. And there's two ways to read that. If you're a Christian, you read that and go, yeah. Oh, look at this. It's a kind of foretelling of what Jesus does, dying for all of us. Caiaphas, though, means it differently. He's like, if we can get rid of this Jesus guy, Rome gets off our back. And the threat of Rome coming in and making life really miserable for us goes away if we get rid of this guy. So yeah, Deb, two different ways that this could mean, certainly depending on who you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bethany was saying, when Jesus is arrested, the disciples, one account says it's Peter specifically, the others it's an unnamed follower. When they strike off the ear, that's a response to Jesus being arrested, which would have been terribly troubling. They didn't anticipate this happening. Well, they knew it could, but they believed this Jesus person was going to be the political, many of them did, a political figure who would be powerful enough, miraculously so, to overthrow Rome and set the Jewish people free, finally. To be arrested was not on anyone's radar. And so Bethany is saying, rightly, there was a response to this very troubling event, very scary event. But the response to Jesus that happens of violence, which, by the way, I've always thought that cutting off just one ear is a very impressive feat. Doesn't it seem like really highly skilled? Anyway, that's not the response. The sword's not the response. Mars? Yeah. Yeah, and then that happens again in Mark, right? With a little more graphicness of the fleeing that happens. I think Mark's maybe trying to say, I've always thought that it was so terrifying that the guy was willing to run away unclothed. Leave my clothes behind, I don't care. This is too scary to stick around for. Yeah. What's that? Might be. Anything else? There is, of course. Ryan, yeah? Yeah, so Ryan's kind of asking what's the context? When does this happen? The events that are happening right before this are the Last Supper, right? And then from that upper room in Jerusalem, they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is maybe about a 20-minute walk, half an hour walk. It's across this valley and then back up the hill. And Jesus prays there, and part of his prayer is asking God, is there another way? And ultimately ends up saying, your will be done. I will do this, even though I can feel how hard this is going to be. I think John's gospel has Jesus sweating blood. It's such a moment of agony and agony. So that's the context. After that time, the disciples have fallen asleep, So it's probably night, maybe early morning. Yes, that's right. While he was still speaking. Yep. He's saying to them, in different gospels, it's a little different. I think one of them he says, "Come, my betrayer has arrived." In other gospels, I think he's talking to the disciples like, "Why couldn't you stay awake with me? I really needed you to stay awake." Yep. Yeah. Okay. Oh, nice. I love it. So everyone can hear, Jess jokingly was saying maybe Peter had a shiv, like a little razor blade, and he just nicked the ear, maybe, perhaps. Yeah? Like a shaving cut? Yes, I praise. Instead of a sword being so difficult to wield, yes. Okay? I don't know if they're just pointing out differences, but I feel like... Maybe like... Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Good, Dustin. Thanks. Dustin is saying that a common theme in here is that there's a mob, a crowd coming with like lanterns and torches and weapons. This is intense, right? And we see the response, kind of connecting to what Bethany was saying too. We have people fight or flight or freeze. We have fighting happening. We have flight happening. These are natural, understandable responses. Jesus somehow offers a different response, which is to actually approach this group and say, here I am. And I'm not going to draw a sword, and I'm not going to run away either. Here I am. I see so many hands. I love this. Now I'm going to go back to Laura, and then I'll come back to you too, because Laura's been waiting so patiently. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Laura's noticing the commonality of attaching these events to different passages of Scripture that are maybe foretelling some of this. That is quite important to the gospel writers, that the person of Jesus would be able to be connected to the Old Testament. And that's kind of a theological conversation that's interesting to have. We won't have it right now in this moment, but yeah, that's important to them. You two can fight over who goes first, yeah. 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 Yeah, the different writing styles, Alyssa's just noticing, which is a great thing to notice. They are very different. Mark is the shortest gospel. Mark's generally like to the point, let's get the facts out. John is more narrative. Certainly Matthew's very concerned about connecting it to Old Testament prophecy. That's throughout Matthew, not just here. Yep. Yeah, good, thanks. Joan? Yeah, yeah. 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 A large group, armed. According to some of these Gospels, this is all very directly coming from the religious leaders of the day. Yep. And while things do get violent, right? One of the disciples strikes an ear off. That's disturbing. But it could have been very violent, and they're willing to do it. They're obviously willing to fight, use force, if necessary, in order to arrest this man. Yep. And that, I think, is probably a good place to kind of pivot here and just allow me to say a couple of words about this. Yeah. I mean, you all noticed so many of the things that are here and some of the things I didn't even think of. But I'm sharing this exercise here with you all because I'm thinking about violence in the political space. The religious leaders are political folks of their day. They don't have a lot of political power. I talked about this last week briefly, right? Rome has the power. But Rome handed out little bits of power across its empire to different bodies to try and maintain the peace. And Rome gives the religious leaders some power in their little sphere. They have their own guards, their own little police force, if you will, that they can, employ when things get out of hand religiously. And that's what's happening here. You have an effort to have these three things lead to the outcome that they are hoping for. Maybe if we show up with a mob with torches and weapons, we'll strike enough fear to get what we want. It didn't hurt. Made all the disciples flee. Maybe we'll be able to hold on to power. That's what Deb was saying. It's better if one man dies for the people. Again, for them, that meant Jesus dying so that they didn't lose their power. And we'll resort to violence if we have to. Totally. Happily, perhaps. I'll recommend a book to you if you're curious about those three things, and especially those three things in terms of today's political climate in the United States. This is Andrew Whitehead's American Idolatry. That's the title of the book. He's specifically writing about white Christian nationalism. But he does some historical work too, and then he talks about these three things of fear, power, and violence. And he calls fear and power and violence idols, and says that white Christian nationalism has all too often worshipped at the idol of violence. White Christian nationalism, it isn't up on the screen, it's fine. You might be familiar with that phrase, white Christian nationalism. We did this event at JB's about 3 weeks ago, trying to unpack what that ideology is. And in the shortest way that I can say it, white Christian nationalism is an ideology that desires to gain power in order to make this country white and Christian, or at least to ensure that white Christian folks have as much power as possible. And that particular ideology has far too often worshipped at the idol of violence. This is from Whitehead. He says this. In fact, he says that these idols are intertwined often, and they show up in our history. As a country, they do. We've used these three things. White Christians have used these three things in order to get our way. Slavery's a very, in my opinion, obvious example. Christians, not all Christians, but many Christians, justified slavery because it kept them in power, and they were willing to use violence or at least look the other way when violence was employed to maintain this status quo of slavery. You know, when you think about what white Christians, not all white Christians, but many white Christians did around the founding of our country to Native Americans, these three things are at play there too. We want power, we want land, and we're willing to resort to violence and even justify it if we can somehow say that it's God's will, it's destiny that we take this promised land that God has given us. So this is not new. White Christian nationalism is not new at all, but it is resurging today, or we're having a conversation about it, and we weren't having a conversation about it 10 years ago, probably not even 5 years ago. There is an effort to use fear in order to gain power and to justify violence, if that is what is required in order for God's will, we often would say, if we were a white Christian nationalist, in order for God's will to be done. Jesus shows us the complete opposite. And I can be sympathetic to an individual who chooses fear, power, and violence in the political sphere. I have much less sympathy for a Christian who wields these things. because we are people who have been told to take up our cross and follow Christ. Taking up our cross meaning not choosing power, not employing fear, not choosing violence, instead choosing courage, choosing humility, choosing sacrifice. So may we be those people. Politically, yes. As Christians, may we demand as best we can, as often as we can, that the people who are voted into office, who we give power to, are people who demonstrate these characteristics and not the others we've been talking about. It would be appropriate for us to demand that. Will it happen when we demand it of our elected officials, our drain commissioners and our city commissioners and our county commissioners and our state legislators and our presidents? No, probably not. Not all the time, certainly. But if we are to have a voice in the political process, it is, I think, should sound and look a lot like the voice of Jesus. And so may we be people of courage and humility and sacrifice when we consider our politics, but may we be these people in every sphere of our life. People not governed by fear, but people who, acknowledge that this life is pretty scary sometimes. And yet, we don't have to be governed by it, directed by it, because we have each other and we have the Spirit of God at work in us. We can be people of humility, not people hungry for power, using our power for self-interest, but using what power we have for the sake of the other. And we can be people of sacrifice. It's not easy. It wasn't for Jesus either. But instead of choosing violence, and violence has lots of forms, right? We can be violent towards each other with our words. We can be violent certainly in our actions. And this takes just a myriad of different shapes and forms in our lives. Can we be people of sacrifice instead? So like I said at the beginning, this is light and easy fodder. This is just simple stuff, right? No, this is the hardest of stuff. And yet my sense is that if you're here, it's because you already, long before we ever started talking about this, knew that this is the way. It's the way to life. It's the way to community. It's the way to mutual flourishing. It's the way to the kind of world that we long for. But again, to quote Martin, we need a friend. We need each other. And so we're going to come around this table, which is a very communal act, as we often call it, communion, right? This act of coming together involves us coming before God and communing with Christ and coming before each other and communing with each other. Both are happening here every time that we share this meal. At the branch, when we do have communion together, which is most every week, we have a couple of stations in the front and in the back. And if you choose to share in this meal with us, which you are invited to do, everyone is invited. You can simply come to that station in the front or in the back, and we'll place a piece of bread in your hand, and you can take a cup out of the dish. And then we bring those back to our seat, and we eat and drink them together. But in order for that all to happen, we need some lovely people willing to volunteer to help serve. There's one. We usually have 4 or 5 folks every week who just decide to come up here and help us out. Nolan's a veteran, so Nolan, you get to choose. Take whatever you want, wherever you want. You go back with him? Sweet, the dynamic duo. The children have led us. Kevin, thank you. Laura, appreciate it. Good. If you need a gluten-free option, that's up front here at this table. It looks today like it is a very large and potentially delicious.
Whoa. Gluten-free cookie.
So, hey, this is it's a cookie, and so yeah, everyone's going gluten-free today. I have 7 or 8 of them. So the first 7 or 8 up here get to have a cookie for communion today. We did have debates in seminary. I did. Did you? Did you? Around like, is it okay to have
Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew? Sure.
That was
Was that one of the, yeah? Cookies, bread. Does it have to be bread? Does it have to be wine? We don't do wine. We do juice. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I think God can meet us in whatever we may have available to us this morning, which again today is a lemon cookie. So, friends, these are the gifts of God for the people of God. Let's share in them together. What a lovely practice this is. There are a few cookies. There are quite a few cookies left. So anyone afterwards who's just looking for a sweet treat, they are available. What a gift, though. In that line, there was laughter. There were a lot of smiles as young people came forward, or as we chuckled about lemon cookies, or as my daughter told me, that you can have a higher blood alcohol content on Sundays when you're pulled over because of the potential of wine. She learned that in her driver's ed class, so maybe we're switching to wine next week. I don't know. I know it. In all of that, God meets us and reminds us that God's love for us is unending. It cannot be stopped. Not even death can stop God's love coming for us. So let's take and eat, remembering that. And this cup is both a gift and calling. It's both a reminder that God has poured out everything for us, but then it's this call to go and do the same. So we take and drink, remembering that this morning. If you have a communion cup, you can put it in this basket as it makes its way around the room, and we'll take care of them from there. Teresa's going to lead us in a song. Do you want to say anything about this song?
It's a song that we sang last week together. When I first heard this song, the lyrics of it are just striking to me because it's in question form, saying, I really do want to hope in a better way, in the way of love. But it's also this really honest, can we actually do that? So I think it's beautiful. I think the lyrics of it speak to what we've been talking about, that we can be made whole. We can lay down our weapons, and we can open up our hearts and let love do the thing that love does. So I'm going to invite you to stand and sing along with me the song Will We Ever Rise? Will we ever rise? Will we ever rise above the fear? Can we learn to see the need? Can we share humanity? I can see another day come. Broken people, we can be made whole. We can be made whole. We can be made whole. As we lay down our weapons, open up our hearts. Love is breaking us, love remaking
Well, this week, may you be people who are honest enough to ask questions like that, honest enough to feel all that this world brings. And then may you be people who remember that rising is, in fact, kind of who we are. We are people who rise because we follow someone who rose. We are people who love because we follow someone who loved. We are people who do not draw the sword or run away in fear, but we are people who stand in the moment and do our best to love well. Be those people this week. Amen. Amen. Good to see everyone. Have a good Sunday today.